This video will explain why internet nerd culture can be so incredibly negative about something that they profess to be into, like Star Wars or DC movie, or popular IP video game from EA. This video will explain why these nerd culture topics can be so negative online and how that can impression upon somebody a very negative opinion of that thing just based on the discourse online, when in reality, the thing is quite popular. This video will explain how the negative impression of something online can be incredibly different than how the thing is very well received in real life, be it a movie, video game, comic book. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something controversial. I'm going to go and say something that you probably shouldn't say online unless you're behind some sort of a barricade. I'm going to say something positive on YouTube about something popular. I like popular AAA titled games. Stuff from EA. I enjoy incredibly successful and popular movie franchises like Star Wars and Star Trek and Lord of the Rings and Marvel and DC. I like these things. And I like if you like these things. But even if you don't like the things that I like, I appreciate your happiness with the things that you enjoy. Even if I don't like those particular things that you like. And none of that is actually controversial, right? But in this online space, amongst the internet neckbeards constantly shouting, "Stop liking things I don't like!" it does seem a little bit out of place to be positive. There is a disconnect between online discourse about something and how it is actually received. There is a difference. Look at Street Fighter or Call of Duty or some popular gaming franchise, and take a look at the YouTube comments versus some critic reviews. There is a big difference here. And look at the amount of people who play a game versus the online discourse about that game. Do people really play this much of a game that it seems that they hate? So movies really aren't that different. You can look at objective measures of a film's success, like returning to the movie and scoring a higher box office with return trips, or a cinema score where people are asked their actual real-life opinions of a movie in real life right after they've come out of the movie, versus the YouTube comments about the movie. There's a disconnect. There's a difference. So why, when something is popular by more objective measures, does the conversation online seem so negative? It is important to keep in mind, popular things are popular because people like them. And I suppose you could say, oh, that person only likes that thing because they're not a real fan. They don't really understand this IP. They're not a real fan like me. Otherwise, they would hate it. It's pretty illogical to hear that, but that is a common argument. It's the no true Scotsman's logical fallacy. You'll see it with all sorts of gatekeeping in nerd culture. If somebody likes a certain anime, and you don't particularly like that anime, a lot of nerds will say, oh, that person, he's not a real anime fan because he likes things that I don't like. The problem with that fallacy is they can make the same argument about you. Your opinion doesn't matter because your opinion is different from this person. Therefore, you are not a true Scotsman or a true Star Wars fan or a true anime otaku. A trait of nerddom older than comic book stores, a trait of fandom is older than the internet, is that people will profess to have opinions about a subject in order to sound knowledgeable about that subject.
Worst cosmic wars ever. Worst crossover ever. worst reading ever. The worst movie ever. And send and sip.
But would somebody actually profess to have an opinion about something with no actual knowledge of the subject matter? Would somebody actually say that they have a strong opinion about a movie or video game without actually having seen the movie or played the video game? Yes. The answer to that is yes. Yes, people do that. Yes. And how? As a matter of fact, a Columbia University study answered this question specifically in a scientific study. The study shows that most people didn't even see the thing that they expressed a critical opinion about online. 6 out of 10 links shared on social media are never actually read by the person posting it, just sharing the link to sound knowledgeable about the subject matter without actually reading the subject matter that they have now just shared. People profess opinions about something even if they have no actual experience with the subject matter. But to make matters worse, people base their opinions off these people's opinions in order to sound like they're knowledgeable of the subject. To put it plainly, people will base their opinions about something based on somebody else's opinion that is negative, but not even knowledgeable of the subject that they profess to know about. It's just a chain of people wanting to sound informed about something, with very few people actually being informed about the thing. We like to think of ourselves as critical thinkers, but countless university studies have found otherwise. Data shows that instead, we base negative opinions off other people's negative opinions, rather than basing on critical thinking or first-hand knowledge of a subject. So yes, you don't actually have to have seen or experienced the thing in order to express a strong opinion about said thing. But sometimes that anonymous, sometimes horribly uninformed opinion, critical review of that thing is more likely to be seen if it is negative, and more likely to be taken seriously if it is negative. Negativity bias is a thing. It is a scientifically proven and demonstrable fact. Negativity bias is built into our psychology to avoid danger. Take the statement, "Look out for that snake," versus a more positive or neutral statement like, "That cloud sure looks like a bunny." The warning holds more value on a psychologically deep level rooted into how we survive and evolve as humans. We tend to put more importance and value on negative reviews. It's our vigilance for threat mechanism doing exactly what it's meant to be doing throughout all of human evolution. Quite honestly, any anime of the last 10 years is horribly subpar. It really has no comparison to the great anime of the Akira Ghost in the Shell era. And that is my sincere opinion. And I'm speaking completely out of my ass. I have no knowledge of anime, I don't know any sort of facts that would support that opinion I just laid out, but it sounded generally negative and critical, and somebody who's only had a very loose knowledge of anime might think that what I said was a valid opinion. But it isn't. It was just speaking right out my ass. Based on the reality of this data and these studies, you can say that just because something is negatively talked about online does not mean that it is negatively received in real life. This isn't actually news to people in the world of reviews. Rotten Tomatoes, following the release of Star Wars The Last Jedi, Rotten Tomatoes changed the whole way it let users review movies. They used to not even ask if you'd seen the movie you are reviewing, or how many times you had reviewed it under different names. During that time, right before The Last Jedi came out, Rotten Tomatoes was bombarded by continuous internet hate comments regarding the race of the actors, their gender, a few comments addressing the actual merits of the movie, and many from before the movie was even released. The problem was reviewers could be anonymous, spam as many times as the poster felt like, and in the aftermath, Rotten Tomatoes decided they needed to change the way they had their policy to make people at least prove they had seen the thing they are reviewing. Just because the conversation about something is certainly negative in that online space does not mean that it is negatively received in actual reality. In actual reality, people enjoy going to very popular movie franchises like Star Wars, like Batman or Superman. But if your entire view of the world comes only through your computer monitor, if your entire perception of the discourse about culture is only what you see in your narrow algorithm-fed feed, you could be forgiven for assuming that people really hate things like Star Wars or DC movies. Now, for a lot of people, they may have it in their head that something is not liked or hated, and then when they're presented with new evidence to the contrary that shows that the thing is actually quite popular by more objective measures of success, they will reject that new information in favor of the previous assumption that they already had in their head, that the thing is not popular. So when an increase in ratings comes up or better reviews than expected of a certain property, a lot of people will chalk that up to people hate watching a thing. Hate watching does exist and is a thing, but we need to keep in mind that it is a subset of people who are watching a certain property. Somebody who is watching something because they enjoy hating it is a subset of the group that watches the property. And then a subset of that group would be people who comment about it on YouTube. And a subset of that group would be a group of people that comment negatively about it on YouTube. So hate watching does not represent the majority, but rather a subset of a subset of a subset of a subset. And so it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to attribute something like an increased ratings due to hate watching, because this does not represent a sizable amount of the people watching, by definition. The truth is, things become popular because people like them. And I want to be clear about this part because people will take a piece of information, purposefully misconstrued it, so they can find fault with the entire overall argument. So I want to be clear. There are legitimate negative criticisms about every single thing. Every movie, every video game, every comic book, everything. There are legitimate criticisms about this thing. Knowing that is common knowledge. Pointing it out is redundant and does not make you special. Everybody knows that there are legitimate criticisms about everything. This is a video explaining that there are negative comments online that can be perceived as the majority, although they are not necessarily informed and definitely not representative of the entire group, just a small subset of online commenters that are noticed more often because they are negative. This is a video explaining that negativity does exist, but is blown out of proportion into being seen as the majority view simply by virtue of being negative. Your criticisms are probably making you sound uninformed. Regurgitating online hate from some online discourse in an actual conversation is not the same as presenting an actual thought-out point of view of your own. And yeah, I really have no first-hand knowledge or experience with this thing, but I want to be included in this conversation and sound like I know what I'm talking about, so I watched an online review of it, and because I'm not good at thinking my own thoughts, I rely on internet influencers to tell me what to think, so I can tell you what I think, which is not actually based off my thoughts or opinion at all, but a mindless regurgitation of oversimplified and inaccurate bumper sticker versions of sound bites that I'm hoping to pass off to you as a hot take that came completely from me. So you don't personally have a thought-out opinion at all, do you? Let me consult Reddit, and I'll get back to you on that. We try to pass off ill-informed negative reviews of something we heard or saw online as our own thought, just mindlessly regurgitating the negative review that we heard in order to sound informed and be part of the conversation. To avoid looking really dumb, there's some stuff that we need to be knowledgeable of when we fall into this little trap of just putting the conclusion that we heard online before the actual thought that preceded it. Since the days of pre-social media nerd culture, we share our thoughts about things that we like, but inevitably the conversation turns into who can sound more knowledgeable about the thing. And that often comes in the form of criticisms. We say, worst movie ever, or it stinks, or something along those lines. If you've lived in this nerd world for a while, you've probably seen it more than once. People just present what they think would sound like an informed conclusion, just simply repeating somebody else's conclusion that they heard online. People have always just regurgitated what they think will be a hot take without actually coming up with a reason to think that thing beforehand. It's lazy. It's not actual thought. It's just mindlessly regurgitating the negativity that you saw online. Simply repeating some influencer's hot take is not the same as having thought to a conclusion and then presented that thought-out conclusion. If you're just regurgitating somebody's hot take online, it's very easy to poke holes in that upon any sort of follow-up questions about how you reached that conclusion.
As a true Star Wars fan, I can say that George Lucas raped my childhood by re-releasing his films with updated remastered graphics.
And you know, old versions of those movies still exist, right? I mean, you can watch them at any time. Those hard copies, they still exist. And in the future, there's going to be this thing called the interweb where all recorded media will be accessible to everyone at all times. So what about having multiple options of viewing these movies has caused your childhood to be raped? I honestly hadn't given it any more thought than that first hot take that I presented to you.
The Star Wars prequel films are utter garbage and have completely raped my childhood again. Complete failure.
Yeah, those movies don't really work for me either, but you know, they're not made for me. They're made for 8-year-olds. And 8-year-olds, the little kids that these movies are made for, really seem to like them. I mean, they have mostly positive reviews overall, and critics seem to appreciate for what they're actually made to do. So how did you determine that it was a failure despite breaking all sorts of records and being loved by the audiences it's intended for?
I honestly hadn't given that any more thought beyond my first statement. Disney has just ruined Star Wars and raped my childhood for yet another time.
And by ruin, do you mean broke all sorts of box office records and people chose to continue going back to the movie theater, consistently reviewed overall as positive, and created wildly popular televised mediums like The Mandalorian, and created the Star Wars Story Group, which keeps the canon consistent across multiple platforms, and received more than a couple nominations and awards for special effects, but also directing and writing? And how has this personally ruined your childhood?
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that and let you know what Reddit tells me to think. Okay, so I found a post that definitely wasn't from a 14-year-old edgelord who let me know what I think. I/Internet thinks that Star Wars was ruined by Disney because old man Luke Skywalker wasn't a super rad take-no-prisoners badass who goes ham on everyone with mecha outfit and 5 lightsabers while riding a skateboard and slamming back a Monster Energy drink and cuts off like 50 heads of stormtroopers while flipping the bird because he just threw away his lightsaber and refused to kill anyone. Not my Luke Skywalker.
Not your Luke Skywalker. I get that. But it is the same character who saved the galaxy by throwing away his lightsaber and refusing to fight.
He wasn't slamming back a Mountain Dew or flipping a bird or nothing!
The truth is, grabbing somebody's hot take from off the internet and misrepresenting it as your own thought-out opinion isn't only intellectually dishonest, but it can make you look pretty stupid to anybody with more than a passing knowledge of the subject that you're trying to criticize. Somebody else who has actually done the logical thought, done the critical thinking to reach their own conclusion over, let's say, a movie, is going to see right through your BS when you're just copying some BS conclusion that somebody else negatively commented about online.
You know, Barack Obama wasn't even born here. He's a foreigner. Did you know that? I did my research online. Right. But how did you reach that thought-out conclusion? Yeah, well, I mean, show me the birth certificate. He doesn't have a birth certificate, so here it is. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the Earth, it's actually flat. Right. But haven't you ever seen, like, a ship sail off to sea, or the Earth's round shadow on the moon, or maybe an eclipse, or have you ever seen the curvature of the Earth while on an airplane, for instance? Or have you ever traveled through different time zones, or have you ever watched a sunset? No.
There may be an assumption that somebody's critical opinion of something is thought out simply because it's critical, simply because it's negative. There may be an assumption that that person's sensibilities and standards are higher than the normal person because they're finding fault with this thing. Yeah, you might like that show, but I know why it's bad, and I'm going to say that it's bad. So you think that I'm thinking more critically about this thing than you. The truth is, that's not how real criticism works. For example, I truly love Hamlet. No joke, I do feel that it is the best work ever created in the English language. It is poetic, it is beautiful, the structure of it is, for me, perfect. I love me some Hamlet. But I can criticize the hell out of it. Even though I might think it is the best piece of work ever produced by man. It takes nothing to dress it down. It doesn't make me good at critical thinking. It just means that I decided to criticize it. It doesn't mean that Hamlet is bad because you can think of critical things to say about it. It takes nothing to be critical of something. It doesn't make you smart, and it doesn't make you special. I used to criticize things all the time. I mean, I was an edgy 14-year-old who just thought that thinking things were shitty somehow meant that I had higher taste than the next person that liked it. Well, I grew out of that. Right about 14 years old, I grew the fuck out of it. You see, as you mature and you become an adult, I'm 40 now, you start to experience hardships in life. And something that has done to me personally is it's given me the ability to appreciate good things in life. The truth is, once I've seen through the BS facade that being critical of things doesn't make you a critical thinker, it became a lot less appreciated when I heard it from other people. It just became useless to me. I'm old enough now to know what I like and don't like, regardless of what you're telling me to think. I'm old enough now that I can form my own opinions without looking to my internet YouTuber influencer to tell me what my opinion should be. Now, it's fine to hate things. It's fine to not like things. Everything is worth not liking on some level or another, no matter how beloved it is. You know what is appreciated, though, is when I see somebody who's happy. As an adult, you start to assure your own happiness in life just by making the right decisions, building a life around yourself that's consistent in the way that you want it. And seeing somebody else's joy, if you've reached that level of maturity, is a great thing. You like to see other people happy. Not seeing them happy is good if there's a way that you can then help them, if there's something that can be done with it. If it's just somebody spouting their negative opinion that odds are they just grabbed from off the internet, that's totally useless to a functioning adult. There's nothing you can do with that, and it really doesn't help you. An edgy 14-year-old that wants nothing but the worst for everybody because they feel shitty and has to spread that hate through every narrow faucet of the internet. Every little crevice needs to be filled with their negativity because the world needs to feel the way that they feel. You grow out of that. Right about the time you stop wearing leather jackets and rat tails in the 90s. Right about the time you stop wearing the spiked hair in the 80s. Right about the time you turn 15 and you stop shopping at Hot Topic and you start appreciating actual adult stuff. You stop appreciating the malaise and sadness in other people. You want to start championing positivity because as an adult, you've seen enough negativity that you're like, okay, I understand negativity. I've felt it. I've seen it. Give me something I can fix. Give me something that I can enjoy. Give me something positive. I don't need to see others unhappy in order for me to be happy. As an adult. Now, as a 14-year-old edgelord, you might be tempted to cram every bit of negativity that's in your being into every faucet of every little internet avenue where someone might give it some attention. As a 14-year-old edgelord, you might really need to make sure other people know how miserable you are, because if they can feel a little bit miserable by osmosis, maybe that'll mean that your happiness can someday be achieved. Maybe by comparison to other people's unhappiness, you can be less miserable yourself. But you grow out of that. You become an adult. And when you become an adult, honestly, that completely useless negativity that you can't really do anything with becomes utterly useless. And once you've grown up past this phase, once you've matured a little bit, you can leave those negative 14-year-old edgelords to their keyboards and start appreciating things in life that bring you joy. And the next level of maturity after that is you start to appreciate the joy in other people having joy. So eventually you'll leave the negativity behind and move to a place in life with the rest of us adults where we're celebrating the things that we like, because why waste time on that negativity?